Hey guys, this is Mathil here once again, and today I got it, I couldn't resist. So anyway, here we are again on PoE, and we're gonna talk about the Lacerate build that I've made during the course of the league. And this is all because one of our new subscribers, Rohan P, big shout out to you. He asked if I was gonna make a video of it, and I initially thought that, you know, I don't think anybody would be noticing the build anyway, but since of course he did, I'd be happy to oblige and give a little bit more detail about the build, how it works and all that. So my personal opinion though, before we start, you know, you shouldn't have that many expectations or standards towards this build. I mean, for one, it's not gonna clear Uber bosses, so if you think that this can, it won't. I mean, unless of course if you have the mechanical prowess to fight against the Uber bosses, then sure, but I didn't decide to go for that. I mean, I was making a lot of money with this build anyway. I basically tried and used every strat. I went with mapping, I even went with delirious mapping. It could go up to 60% delirious. I haven't tried more, but I'm pretty sure it will, but it's gonna be definitely slow though. And you know, it's basically done everything. It's done expeditions and harvest crafting, or you know, basically looking for harvest crafts. It can do almost anything except for, I guess, the Uber bosses in general. I mean, from what you can see here, the only thing I haven't done is the feared, because you know, I didn't see the need to. But everything else here, the form, forgotten, twisted, hidden, and even the elder slayers, all of them have been done by me. And even with the elder slayers, we even fought them with height of hubris, so that it was, you know, pretty significant. And of course, you know, I also fought with them with the Maven's passive that had all at once, where all of them are released at the same time. Or is that, yeah, with captivated interest, I had that along with height of hubris. It was still doing really nicely. I still managed to kill them deathless. So it goes to show that this build can do a lot, but you know, it's basically just gonna be for your average guy who just wants to have fun with the league. And I did have a lot of fun with it, and you know, as you can see, we still managed to get the 38 challenges. We didn't need to go for the other ones. I mean, I just bought some of the challenges anyway, so you know, that just goes to show how much this build can make money as well, aside from being pretty strong. So you know, it's been fun overall. So yeah, core items though, I will explain it in the PUB, which we will open up. Here we are. With the PUB though, if you want a league start with this, I mean, it's gonna be pretty straightforward. You know, just try and get your way as close to Resolute Technique as possible, because Resolute Technique is going to be our core offensive keystone, because it'll basically allow us to forget about accuracy. Because the reason why this build is strong is because Crimson Dance has to be constantly applied to the enemy. So the sooner you can get Resolute Technique, the better. But during acts 1 to 5 you don't need to, and even during acts 1 to 5 you can also get your Lacerate immediately. Just get, you know, chance to bleed, melee fizz, and multi-strike, so that you can start stacking your Crimson Dance quickly. And when it comes to the items, I mean, I'm not gonna give you guys any specifics on, you know, what you need, as long as you know your main pointers are: get yourself a one-handed axe, because this is what the build will require. Get yourself a one-handed axe with as high amount of flat fizz as possible. Then you can just prioritize the percent fizz later, because the flat fizz will be the main base damage, so to speak, of your bleeds. So the higher the flat fizz you can get, the better the bleeding that you can apply. Next, of course, you know, you're gonna have to max out your resistances whenever you can. During acts 1 to 5 it wouldn't matter that much, but of course once you're in act 6 the 10, especially when you get to maps. That's when you're gonna have to try and balance your resistances. So I'm just gonna leave this completely open for you guys so that you can adjust it according to what your build will require at that time, so that of course you won't be too constrained, especially during league start. You know, it's not like everybody gets to have a gold ring dropper or something like that, or even a tabula. I didn't even level this up with a tabula anyway during the league start. I used a 5 blink until I was, what, 93? Yeah, you know, it's a pretty stable, damage dealer. And as you can see here, the progression isn't that much, you know, different from the past builds. Like from there, once you get to Act 6 to 10, this is where you're gonna start adjusting, you know, on whether or not you'll need more damage, if you'll need more life. If you'll need more damage, then you can just head on over to Hatchet Master and Dirty Techniques. That'll give you the biggest spike of damage. And then of course, if you want more life, you can just go to the Scion wheel as quickly as possible. And block, though, we will have to get block, because, you know, that's basically one of our main defensive mechanics. And we're going to use it along with Versatile Combatant as well, when which you combine that with a spell suppression as well, if you can cap your spell suppression, which I did. And as you can see here, we're also leaving Iron Reflexes out so that we have evasion. So if you think about it, our layers of defense are going to be armor, evasion, attack block, spell block, and spell suppression. That is already 5 layers of defense, which is really, really strong in maps, and pretty good as well against the bosses, because I mean, sure, you can evade some of the attacks, sure, you can block some of the spells, but you know, there will be times where you will get unlucky. As what I did as well, you know. But yeah, these 5 layers of defense are really, really strong on maps, so you won't have that much of a problem as long as you can cap your resistances and you can get a stable amount of life. You'll usually just have to worry about your damage. And the POB here as well also shows, you know, basically the clusters that you'll need, or not the clusters, but the skill gems that you'd like to get during that time, and the items as well that you'll need to get. And speaking about items, though, I will be explaining this. Jack the Axe is a mandatory item to get for this. Once you're at level 65, which is basically once you're in Act 9 or Act 10, Jack the Axe is going to be insanely strong, because you can use it that early and you can already get more chance to bleed, the Fizz Dot multi for bleeding with this weapon, and the Thirst for Blood. Thirst for Blood applies 20% more damage with bleeding, and aside from that, it also gives you life regen, flat life regen per bleeding enemy, which is very, very strong. Like if, for example, I show you here, so we have Thirst for Blood active, right? If we go to the number of nearby bleeding enemies, you can see our life regen is currently at 19. But if there's one, and if, for example, that's going to be a boss, you already have flat 379 life regen. And if you're in maps, that can increase by a lot. You know, as you can see, it can go up to 5, as you can see here, but flat 1.8 thousand life regen is really, really good regeneration. It's almost just as strong as Pious Path for the Templar. So if you can imagine, you have Templar regen with that much bleed multi, really, really powerful. And the only time you'll actually need to replace this is when you have enough money to get yourself an Elder Axe, which I'll show you how to craft. But yeah, basically that's, you know, the main thing that you'll have to go for once you're at 90. It's basically just going through to get Veteran Soldier, you know, maxing out your ascendancies. By then you should of course get Outmatch and Outlast, since we have Blood Rage, and for me this is the more favorable option compared to Arena Challenger. You know, some people recommend Arena Challenger or glorify the Gladiator because of Arena Challenger, but for me it just doesn't work as strong as Outmatch and Outlast. But yeah, that's basically it. And then of course I'm gonna give you guys as well the passive tree adjustments when you're gonna go from without clusters to clusters, and it's also a pretty significant damage increase. So yeah, I'm gonna give this POB here in the description, so you guys can fiddle around with it. And basically this is just what I went with while I was leveling it up, so you can still adjust this to basically how you'd prefer, whatever you feel more comfortable with. It's totally fine. You don't need to follow this build strictly. That's the amazing flexibility of this build, which is why it's actually really fun. And of course, one of the other items after that, Rizlatha's Coil, is basically a no-brainer for bleed builds, especially with Crimson Dance, because what it does is that the more maximum physical attack damage will basically like increase the gap or like raise the bar for your maximum damage, while the 30% less minimum physical attack damage will mean that your minimum physical attack damage will be less, which means that it is actually raising the value. Despite it saying less, it just means that the gap between your maximum and your minimum is being narrowed a little bit more. So that basically means that not only are you getting more bleeds from that, your average bleed damage will also be higher as well. That is why Rizlatha's Coil is very, very strong. And I recommend as well, if you're gonna level this up, find a belt that doesn't have any resistances, because if you have a belt with good resistances and then you suddenly have Rizlatha's Coil, you're gonna feel a significant drop in your durability. And unless you've already prepared for that in your other gear, it's gonna be pretty hard to adjust quickly. So yeah, just look for a belt, with life, maybe a rustic sash with good life, and maybe increased flask charges gained, so you can have a little bit more comfortable flask usage while you're leveling up. And that's basically it. And then once you're at 90, that's when you're gonna go for some of your elevated items, or not elevated items, but your influenced items. You're gonna have a Hunter Amulet with Fizz DOT multi, and of course a Warlord item, or Warlord ring rather, with vulnerability. You can start off with 20% increased effect, and then you can just bring this up to 32. And then of course a Warlord shield where you gain 1% of your life on block. The reason why I took this over the Surrender is because the Surrender sure will give you flat 250 of life when you block, but you can't get spell suppression on the Surrender, right? If you have a rare shield, that's going to be pretty powerful. I mean, you would want to have the percent life on block, a good spell suppression chance, and maybe even higher chance to block, so that you can drop some of your block chance passives on your tree and go for even more damage or even more flat life, right? Which will increase the basic amount of life that you have gained when you block. And with Versatile Combatant, where you have a 1 in 2 chance to block both attacks and spells, this is gonna really save your life a lot, like a lot during maps. So yeah, this is really, really strong. So yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Flasks, I'm gonna leave them blank. There's nothing too amazing that we'd like to go for, maybe a Bottled Faith if you're rich. But yeah, as long as you have your life flask with Corrupting Blood immunity, any utility flasks that can help buff you up, a Quicksilver is gonna be great for speeding along maps. What else? Amethyst Flask is also gonna be good, especially since Chaos Res is pretty prevalent, or like Chaos damage is pretty prevalent during this league, and it's gonna be hard to max out your Chaos Res immediately, especially because this build, requires some stats here and there. So you may need a ring that will give you some dexterity and intelligence. So I'm just gonna leave most of that open so that you can adjust it to how you have your build at that point. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it. When it comes to crafting, let's head on over to Craft of Exile, one of the really strong resources that PoE players have right now. Craft of Exile. So let's have this at the top. So when you're gonna craft the axe, it'll depend on you. I chose the Reaver axe because it has higher flat fizz, like higher base fizz damage, so you know that's going to increase your bleed by a lot. But of course, unless you have Awakened Multi-Strike, that's going to be pretty hard. And once you get that done, I mean, you can always go for the classic Siege Axe, which gives you a lot of extra attack speed. So if you don't have Awakened Multi-Strike just yet, you can have the Siege Axe. Then when you have Awakened Multi-Strike, you can go with the Reaver Axe, you know. Still totally up to you. This is what I love about it. It's just so flexible. So, for example, oh wait a minute. We don't have the influence right. Oh, we can put that there anyway. So what we're gonna do is that you can either fossil craft this or essence craft this. Fossil crafting can give you a quicker chance of getting the physical damage over time multi for bleeding, but it's a little bit too broad, so to speak, because you know you're not gonna be as lucky as getting tier 1 flat fizz and then tier 1 bleed. So the more convenient way of going about that is with essences. And let's just put in a random affix here and there. But there we go, now it's rare. The best thing to do is to have Essences of Contempt and just basically spam that until you get your tier 1 Elder Bleed. So if, for example, you get that done, what you'll have to do is to basically just get, let's put that on there. So if, for example, it's already at that stage, what you'd like to go for is to basically just craft an empty prefix, right? And basically just craft anything that you can just remove, you know, just put %fizz, or wait a minute, let's go to the crafted area first. Yeah, basically just pull damage, and then what I did was that I just went with a reforged key prefixes, you know, which is why this build is actually pretty good, because you know the crafting process to get your rare axe is going to be pretty expensive, which is why Jack the Axe is a real lifesaver. So for example, you keep that and you know you get attack speed. The one thing that you'd like to go for is, you know, tier 2 attack speed or higher, anything that you cannot craft on the crafting bench. Like if it's higher than the crafting bench, you can already use it and then just min-max further down the line. But if you get lucky and you get yourself tier 1 attack speed, you can just basically multi-mod that and then just add your %fizz, because this is a crafted prefix, so you can just add your tier 1 crafted %fizz, which is 1 exalt, and then physical damage over time multi, which is also pretty strong. So for example, let's just slam attack speed here. So let's say you got lucky, or better yet, maybe let's say that you have, even just tier 2 attack speed. Right, so once you have that, you are gonna change your crafted prefixes. You're gonna have multi-mod on that. You're gonna change your fizz damage or your cold damage to fizz. Once you get that %fizz there, that's gonna be really great. And then lastly, the nice thing about this is that you can craft physical damage over time multiplier as well. So there you go. That is basically your upgrade from Jack the Axe. And if you copy that and put that on PoE, you know, if you do that yourself, you can see that it's the next significant spike. Anything that's going to be remotely close to this is not going to give that much damage because of the Thirst for Blood. Thirst for Blood is really strong, and to surpass Thirst for Blood, you're going to have an axe that is at least like this. But yeah, that's basically it. I mean, how to get that done. And then, you know, next, if you want to min-max further, you can get more Warlord rings. As you can see here, there are Warlord influences on rings that give you increased damage with bleeding and increased bleeding duration. That is going to be very, very nice, very, very strong. And usually Warlord rings like this are dirt cheap because, you know, bleeding is so off meta. Unless, of course, it's going to be, for example, Steel Ring or a Vermilion Ring that's going to have good stats already. Then these are just going to be worth, yep, just a couple dozen chaos at most. And then what you can do is just, for example, you know, it has good suffixes along with increased damage with bleeding and bleed duration. Get it, reforge, keep suffixes until you get your life, and then craft your Elrayon craft or whatever build prefix that you'd like. Just bench it, you know, and then that's basically it. I mean, I could go so much further into explaining this, but you know, we're already at 20 minutes into the video, so there's like so many things that you can do. It's just so flexible. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I'm sorry I just went too long about it, but that's just how, you know, that's just how much detail that this build can go into. And there's just a lot that you can do with it. Like, for example, when you min-max, you know, you can just get your enchantment with Lacerate and then get your Elder increased fizz damage influenced on that, and then you can get yourself any rare armor that will give you a high amount of life, a high amount of spell suppression, and then use Eldritch Implicits to get whatever implicits that you'd like on your armor. Usually increased effect is great. And then gloves, you know, you can get yourself a pair of gloves like this with good spell suppression and good resistances. I just basically benched the life, and then get yourself fizz damage multi Eldritch Implicit. That is going to be a beautiful, beautiful increase in damage. And then, you know, if you can get a little bit more rowdy with your crafting for your shield, you can get this, or maybe you can even buy this. I'm pretty sure that you can buy a high level shield like this, and with the amount of currency that you can farm with this, it'll be pretty easy for you to get this as well, because you can kill bosses. You know, you can go with Delirium, no problem. You know, you can literally find your way to get this. And then, of course, basically, I mean, the pair of boots that I have is also actually pretty scuffed, you know? It's just trash at this point. I never even upgraded this until now. I mean, like, once I had this pair of boots, I've never even upgraded them, you know? Yeah, that's just how flexible this build is overall. You could just really just mix and match according to what you want to do. I mean, I've even seen people use Hands of the High Templar with vulnerability on there, so that you don't even need a vulnerability ring. And then, you know, just use basically anything else. I mean, I've seen someone use a Hands of the High Templar with the Circle of Guilt with the Herald of Purity buff, so that they can buff the effect of the physical damage that Herald of Purity gives. There's just so much flexibility that you can do. And this is my take on this, has just basically been one of so many. So yeah, you can literally just do what you want with it, as long as you're following the basic principles that you're increasing your bleed damage and you're decreasing the bleed duration, so that you can basically have that perfect balance of how many times you can apply your Crimson Dance, and basically just make sure that the amount of time that you have there is just a little over your Crimson Dance bleed duration, so that you can constantly have a very, very dense amount of bleed damage. And of course, Reslatha's Coil, like I said, you know, it's just so strong for bleed builds. But yeah, that has basically been it. I have just been going on for so long. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, any further questions, of course, I'd be happy to answer in the comments. And like, share, and subscribe, of course, if you like the content. You know, I could definitely go into a little bit more detail on the even on the specific gear for you if you'd like. And pretty excited to see the patch notes next week. We're gonna have that done. Woo! Hope we can get a huge amount of changes, because that will mean that we can have a lot of things to go through, which means that we'll be streaming PoE again after that to test them, right? So yeah, that has been it, guys. Thank you so much if you've stick throughout the video. It's been pretty long, but you know, it's a lot of detail. And of course I will include chapters there, so you can switch to the specific chapters that you'd like. And I shall be seeing you all in the Balance Manifesto, eh? Hell yeah.